Thank you all for coming today. I have a very special guest, Father D. Mark White, and he is the pastor of two parishes that he takes care of both of them, St. Joseph's in Martinsville and St. Francis in Rocky Mount, Virginia. And we're here today to talk about some of the struggles that he's had with those parishes. And where we are trying to get to the truth and the best way to collaborate with the hierarchy of the church to be able to get there. So we want to start with a prayer. So Father Mark, if you will give us a prayer, and then we'll.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Direct, O Lord, we beseech thee, all our actions by your holy inspirations. Carry them forward by your gracious assistance, that our every prayer and work may begin in you, and through you be happily completed. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Hail
Amen.
Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with
Lord is
thee.
with thee.
Blessed art
Blessed
thou
art
among
thou
women,
among women,
and
and
blessed
blessed
is
is
the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy
Holy
Mary,
Mary,
Mother of God, pray for us
pray for us
sinners,
sinners,
now and at
now
the hour
at the
of our
hour of our
death.
death.
Amen.
Amen.
Saint Joseph, pray for us. Saint
Pray
Francis, pray for
pray
us.
for us.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
And let me just add that if my tongue gets tied and I say something stupid, that the Lord be with me and make sure I'm smart enough to correct it.
Right. Same goes for me.
Yes. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today. And we'll get into the guts of this thing, probably in about 20 minutes or so. Because you're dealing with a very difficult struggle, um, and we just want to kind of outline it before we're going to go into some of your background, even to childhood, because I think that's important to understand the way that people are built, and what is the education that they've gotten and things like that. But can you just kind of outline what your issue is right now, and where you're sitting right now in relation to the church and the two parishes that you have responsibility for?
Sure. Thank you, Dale. It's a pleasure speaking with you about this. I appreciate the opportunity to do so. Right now, I'm suspended from public ministry by the bishop, and at a little bit of an impasse when it comes to my work as a priest, especially at the parishes that you mentioned, where I've been the pastor since 2011. Um, and it has to do with my weblog that I've been publishing now for well over a decade, but specifically with blog posts that I have published about the McCarrick cover-up.
Okay. All right. So what is the main issue right now? I mean, what is the disagreement between you and Bishop Knestout of the Virginia Diocese?
The main,
Richmond Diocese.
right, exactly. Whether or not my blog should be available to the readership or not. The way we're at a complete impasse where he won't restore my priestly faculties, which is what I need to do any assignment of any kind, while I still have a blog available on the internet, or while I still have any social media accounts of any kind.
Okay. All right. So you're not able to conduct any church ministry until you remove your blog. Is that basically the dictum by Bishop Knestout?
That's right. You got it.
Okay. Okay. All right. So let's understand a little bit about who you are, because I think it's really valuable for people to understand that there are people making these decisions and wielding authority, or being submissive to authority, or whatever. And I think it's really important for people to understand where folks' heart is, and how they were raised, and why it is that you believe one thing and Bishop Knestout believes another. Okay, so can you tell me a little bit about your growing up, early years, family structure? Who are the people that are influencing you from a family perspective?
Sure. I had a blessed childhood. I grew up in Northwest Washington, D.C., right inside the city limits in a neighborhood called Chevy Chase, which at that time was middle class families. I was born in 1970. I have a younger brother, just under 2 years, my junior. Uh, and for most of our time growing up, we had an intact nuclear household with extended family in the area on both sides. I grew up among church-going people. We went to church every Sunday. Church was a very big part of our lives. It was really like a second home for our family. And I grew up among reading people. My parents were always reading. We were always talking about books and reading together. And the Christian faith was the central theme of all of our life and study and communication. We went to a Lutheran church. My mother was Lutheran, my father Episcopalian, uh, and it was in college that I became a Roman Catholic.
Okay. All right. So you were raised in the Lutheran Church, basically. I mean, that's
Mm-hmm.
where you got a lot of your scripture understanding and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah,
Okay. And
absolutely.
what moved you to the Catholic Church? Was there anything that kind of stuck out in your mind where you said, okay, the Lutheran Church does one thing, Catholic Church does another, and I'm going to move in that direction?
Sure, excellent question. I mean, I thought from my youngest days of becoming a minister, I was really interested in the minister and what he did and how he did it. Um, but something just wasn't connecting for me in my teenage years. I thought about becoming a doctor and became a little bit estranged from the church. But my family had some problems, and kind of in my later teenage years. And I was working as an office temp downtown Washington, and went out for a walk and got caught in the rain and ducked into a church. And it was St. Dominic's Roman Catholic Church, Southwest Washington.
Okay.
I ducked in there to get out of the rain. I think it's the first time I was ever in a Catholic church. And as soon as I walked in the door of that church, I realized that I was in the presence of God like I never had been before. And I saw
Really?
the red lamp burning next to the tabernacle. I didn't even really exactly know what a tabernacle was, but something spoke to me and told me that red lamp meant he was there. And I was washed over with this sense of God's presence and authority over me like I never had been before. And it was really the turning point of my life.
Okay. Interesting. Very interesting. And how old were you at that point?
21.
21. Okay. So when you walked into that church, was there a mass going on or was it empty?
It was empty.
It
Yeah,
was
I think
totally empty.
it was totally empty. Yeah.
So when you went in there, did you at that point did you have the calling that we call the calling, or did you just think, wow, that's interesting. Maybe I should understand more about the Catholic Church.
I mean, I guess it tells you something about the way a 21-year-old young man's mind works. I mean, it really was the calling, but it took me about another year to
Okay.
really figure it all out. But
Right.
I got, I met a Catholic priest and talked to him about becoming a priest. And he explained to me I needed to become Catholic first,
Right.
which,
Right.
which I then proceeded to do with his help.
Right. Now,
And,
prior to that time, at 20 or 21, were you going to be a minister in the Lutheran Church,
well,
or so you were still undecided, or what was your mind frame at that point?
I appreciate the question. I had become somewhat alienated from the Lutheran Church that I'd grown up in. Uh, I got to put it straight, I guess, because of the sexual ethics, what we were not taught any, and we were taught not really to pay too much attention to them, and something in me told me that wasn't right, and
Right.
so um, I was looking for something that where there was a clearer and stronger moral teaching.
I
Um,
gotcha.
and I knew that the Pope at the time, John Paul II, was teaching that kind of doctrine, and that did attract me.
Okay, so when you say sexual ethics, you're talking about the way that the Lutheran Church dealt with sexuality? Is that
Right,
what you mean?
which was really not to deal with it at all. I mean,
Okay.
to let more or less let the culture define
Right.
the sexual morality.
Anything's okay. You don't have to be married. It's okay. Whatever you want to do, that's Okay, and that didn't quite set with you.
Right. Yeah, and I saw what a disaster it was for everyone around me. Not to have some kind of guiding light, and
Right.
it and from my earliest years, I was fascinated with the Lord Jesus Himself and the Gospels, and um, it seemed clear that He was demanding of me and of us a higher, at least a higher aspiration than free sex.
Right. Right. Okay, so when you were growing up, let's go back to like 14 or 15. I'm sure you're not hanging around with a whole bunch of people that are looking for Jesus Christ.
Right.
So
Yeah.
how did you get to that point? What was it? Was there anything that was in your upbringing that said you need to follow this path?
Yeah, well, our closeness to the church and the liturgical nature of the Lutheran Church, at least the one that I went to, it was very similar to the way that we celebrate the Mass. And so,
Okay.
just having the weekly readings from the Gospels, they started resonating in my mind, I think, from a very early age. I mean, it was a great gift, and so I had a really clear picture of who Jesus Christ is from when I
Okay.
was 7, 8, 9, 10 years old.
Okay.
Um,
At that point did you have a Bible? I mean, were you the kid that
oh,
went home and read what was read in church and go, okay, explain this to me, Mom? Or
well, it's funny you should ask that because what I would do, I had a little Casio stopwatch, and so I would
yeah.
time the sermon
How old are you?
like 10, 11.
Okay.
And so I knew exactly how long the sermon that I had heard was.
Right.
And
Right.
then I would go home after lunch, I'd kind of go up to my room, close the door, and then try to talk about what we read for that exact same period of time to see if I could do it, see what I would come up with.
Right. Right. So you saw yourself as giving homilies? I mean, is that what you did instead of the person that went up with the hairbrush as the microphone, you went up with the hairbrush to do homilies in your bedroom?
That's about it. Yeah, you pretty much got
You're
it.
you're you're quite the nerd, aren't you?
Yes, that's for sure.
That's amazing. That's amazing. What a great story. What a great story. Did you have any other passions when you were growing up? Late in teens or into your high school? I mean, what else were you into?
Basketball. I mean, basketball
Okay.
was my
Okay.
second life for from 10 years old to 18 years old.
Okay. And you're fairly tall. What are you, 6'3", 6'4", something
Six
like that?
three, yeah, 6'3" and a
Six.
half. Mm.
Yeah. Well, now you're 6'1", but you lie about that, don't you? Like every other basketball player. So were you any good?
I was okay. Yeah, I mean, I played on the high school team. I wasn't good enough to play in college, but
Okay.
yeah, I was. We won some championships. I was okay. Defense was my forte.
Okay. All right. You were a shot blocker.
I could block shots. Yeah,
Okay.
box
All right.
out.
So let me go back to Washington. Was there any government connection? Because I have this impression that everybody who lives in Washington has some connection to the government. That's the only reason why you would live there. I mean,
Right.
was that a
Yeah.
connection with either of your parents, or is it just,
I
it was
mean,
just a normal suburb like I experienced in Buffalo, New York?
it's funny you should ask. Neither of my parents worked for the federal government in any way. My father worked for the city government. My brother and I are actually sixth generation native born Washingtonians,
Oh, wow.
which is pretty unusual.
Wow. I didn't even think there were six generations that were.
Right.
So that's all the way back to colonial times, I guess, or pretty close to it.
The beginning of the 19th century. Yeah,
Okay.
our ancestors were in Maryland prior to they moved into
Wow.
DC and at the beginning of the 19th century. But
Gotcha.
actually, my father's work was one of my other interests as a young person because he was a real estate lawyer for um, commercial development of large office buildings in downtown Washington.
Okay.
So he and I would ride around town together, and he'd point out the sites where they were going to build new office buildings and describe the
Right.
architecture and stuff. And I loved all that. I found it really
Now,
interesting.
was it the architecture side or the legal side that interested you?
Well, kind of a combination because it was uh, to get an office building built. It's the Washington D.C. is the most highly regulated commercial development
Right.
uh, area in the country because the height limit is very strict and the use proportions of the building are very strict. You have to have commercial and residential in addition to storefront. You have to have in addition to just pure office space. So
Right.
the way that the architects and the Board of Zoning Adjustment will work together to try to compromise, that was my dad's business, and I found that pretty interesting.
Right. Very good. Very good. Any other significant childhood events that led you to this point that we're going to be talking about here shortly? Is there anything that you say, boy, I'm glad I went through that when I was 14 or 15, because at least it informs me about what decisions I need to make and what actions I need to take?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate your asking that question. When I was in seventh grade, I'd started a new school, and you called me a nerd. I was known as the geek of the week at that school like, for the whole year.
So you wanted multiple weeks.
Exactly, I wanted to regular the whole year, but
Okay.
the English teacher we had, who was kind of tough and brusque with us, demanding, but ultimately very loving. Every few Fridays we had to write a poem and present them. And it was all boys, so it was a moment of great vulnerability for all of us. But one Friday I wrote a poem about Jesus Christ, devotion to him, and I read it and then I started to weep, and I couldn't really help it. I was just kind of
Right.
moved with the emotion that I felt. And instead of derision, the class showered me with affection, and it was
Wow. So they
yeah,
started clapping, or
exactly, yeah,
yeah. Now you were like 12. Is that about right?
right,
You said seventh grade. Okay. Now
exactly.
you said all boys. Did you go to an all
Yeah.
boys school?
I did from seventh to 10th. Yeah, the school my father had gone to, an Episcopal boys' school.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then what other education did you have? So that was, you said, 7th to 10th. And then
Right.
where did
Yeah.
you finish up your high school?
I finished up at a co-ed school called Edmund Burke, where my mom was actually a teacher. It was right around that time I mentioned earlier that my family did start having problems. My parents wound up splitting
I
up,
gotcha. I
and
gotcha.
so
And are
yeah.
they both still alive, your mom and dad?
My mom is. We lost my dad 12 years ago.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah.
So you went to the public high school? I'm
It was
assuming that
private school also, actually.
it was a
Yeah,
private school. Okay,
yeah,
but it was co-ed.
right. Mhm.
Okay, cool. All right. So then after education in high school, one of the things that confused me is on your Facebook page you have Catholic University,
Mhm.
but I couldn't find a seminary. So was
Mhm.
Catholic University also your seminary?
It
I mean,
was. Yeah,
okay. Okay,
yeah,
so you can go to Catholic University and just go as a regular student that's not moving towards the priesthood, or you can go in
right.
another program that has a seminary feature to it. Am I understanding that correctly?
You're absolutely right. Yeah, and I graduated undergraduate from there as a lay student. I became Catholic during that period of time, and
Okay.
then I wound up teaching middle school for a couple of years in
Okay.
Baltimore, and then returned to Catholic University as a seminarian to get the theology degree.
Okay. So that's interesting. So when you went to teach middle school, were you still thinking about the priesthood, or were you still uncertain at that time?
No, I did it really as a way to prepare myself for the priesthood. I
Okay.
was a member of the Jesuit Volunteer Corps. The priest that I had first met was a Jesuit priest, and so at, I was just associated with the Jesuits from when I entered the Catholic Church, and so I had in mind that I would become a Jesuit priest. It
Okay.
didn't work out that way in the end, but I was with the Jesuits in that first stage, teaching at a Jesuit school in Baltimore before I went
Okay.
back to the seminary.
The only thing I know about the different areas, the Jesuits and the Dominicans, the only thing I know about the Jesuits is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, uh, Pope Francis is a Jesuit,
Hmm.
and they had a lot to do with education. When I think of Jesuits, I think of education. Is that a
Hmm.
fair thought, or is there
Yeah.
more to it than that?
Yeah, no, that is a fair thought. Um, the Jesuits are also famous for the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius Loyola.
Okay.
which is a way of praying that when you're a Jesuit novice, and Jesuits help other people do it, and it's a great asset to the church, the spiritual
Okay,
exercise.
a different way of praying. Is that what you said?
Well, it's a particular set of meditations that Saint Ignatius developed. That
Okay.
ideally you spend 30 days in silence doing them. There's other ways of doing them too. They're based on the Gospels, uh, but they really change your life. I mean, I was able to do the 30 days in silence in the January of 1997, and that it was certainly like the foundation of my spiritual life.
Now, is that a retreat that you go off to, or do you do it yourself? Or I mean, how do they normally organize that?
You can do it either way. I did it as a Jesuit novice, so we did it as a retreat at a retreat house. But the Jesuits and people who've been trained by the Jesuits help anybody who wants to do the spiritual exercises do them in any way that they can. So another
Right.
way to do it is actually spending an hour a day for a year. You can achieve the same thing if you
I
give
got you.
yourself an hour of silence a day for a year.
So either I can be silent for an hour every day for a year,
You're
or I
right.
have to go 30
There you
days
go.
without speaking.
Right.
Okay. Well, you know which one I'm going to choose. That's interesting, though. I'm gonna look that up. That looks really, really interesting. Um, okay, so when was the moment that you committed to the church? Okay, so it sounds like you would always seen yourself as somebody who was shepherding other people.
Mhm.
Being in your room trying to figure out how to write a homily and then deliver it. So it
Mhm.
sounds like you were always kind of in that mode. But was there one key moment when you said, "I want to be a priest, and I want to be a priest in the Catholic Church"?
Yeah, it was within that year after I had that experience at St. Dominic's with the Blessed Sacrament, and I started going, more and more to Mass, and eventually became Catholic. And I was at that point, I was really sure that the Lord was calling me to become a Catholic priest. Yeah.
Okay. And at that point, you were at Catholic University?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. So when you went to Catholic University, did you go directly into theological studies, or what do you major in when you go to a place like that and you're ready to be a priest?
Well, I actually wound up majoring in English literature and minoring in Spanish literature. Um,
Okay.
and then when you go back for um, theology studies, then you do a full scale theology program, which is what I did when I went back as a seminarian.
So is it a 4-year period to get your undergraduate? Like when I went to the State University of Potsdam, I get 4 years. So you get a bachelor's, and then you
Exactly.
go and get the specific theology.
Exactly. You got it. Exactly.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. So when you went into the theological program, were you in the seminary at that time? Is that what they say when? So you get your
Yes.
you get your BA or BS, and then you go into seminary, right?
Correct. Right. You
Okay.
got it.
And
Mhm.
and you were still on campus there. They had a
Exactly.
special area where all the seminarians would learn together.
There were different residences for seminarians depending on your affiliation. Like I was a diocesan seminarian studying for the Archdiocese of Washington, and so the
Okay.
largest seminary building was the diocesan seminarians. But then there were other seminary buildings like for the Franciscans, Dominicans.
Oh,
Uh,
really? So they're
yeah,
broken. They're broken down by that. If I wanted to be a Dominican, I would go to the Dominican hall where all the Dominican seminaries would be. Okay,
exactly.
so just for my own curiosity, it has nothing to do with any of this, but why is that? I mean, what is there significant differences when I say Jesuit or Dominican? Isn't it all the same Catholic Church?
Yes, I mean fundamentally, and the we would take classes together because the basic theology instruction was more or less
Okay,
common to all the different groups.
right.
But the different orders have their own particular way of life and their own what's called a charism, the gift that was given to their founder to live in a
Okay,
particular way, to bear witness to the gospel by their way of life. So
gotcha.
um, that's what distinguished the Dominican house or the Franciscan house had a much more structured way of life in the house than we did. Not that ours wasn't. We had structure, but
Right.
not to the extent that they
Like
had.
specific prayer times and specific rituals that would happen throughout the day that everybody would have to participate in. Is that what you're
Exactly.
talking about?
Right. Yeah. Right. And also the way that they would be, um, what's called formation, which I mean, if you're going to become a priest, you have to receive the education, but you also have spiritual, human formation by formators, people that are over you,
Right.
kind of watching over you and evaluating you. And
Gotcha.
if you're in a religious order, your formators are of your order.
I gotcha.
You know what I mean?
I gotcha. About the only thing I'd be able to understand that with is I'm going through. I was honored to be asked to be a godfather for
Mhm.
one of the gals that I've known for a few years, and the formation is these people who are talking the same language as what we're trying to get my goddaughter to understand. We're all talking the same language, and we're all in the same room together, and so we understand where they're coming from and how to answer questions based on their way of thinking about things.
Right,
So
exactly.
that makes
Yeah.
a lot of sense. Okay, so there was one incident that we wanted to bring up, which was the fact that you got kicked out. Okay,
Right.
but I want to go back to your early childhood
Mhm.
to ask a question, and this is a temperament question, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go ask your mother, because she would have a different she would have a different understanding of what your temperament was when you were a kid. Um, but it had something to do with fundamentalism, and I'm gonna ask you to tell me what happened there, because it's terrible when I say, well, you got kicked out, but when I understand it, it seems to be almost nothing. But I do want to bring up what your temperament was. So when you were growing up, it seems like you had a very almost idyllic growing up until you said your mom and dad broke apart. But were you strident on anything, or were you kind of floating along and you were okay with everything? Did you have a short fuse? Did you have a long fuse? And what was your temperament? And did that have anything to do with the fact that that you became, in at least the eyes of some people, a fundamentalist? Which I don't know whether that's a good or a bad thing.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so I
No.
hope that was a terrible question, but just kind of go into what was I like as a kid, and did
Right.
it affect me when I was going through seminary or college life?
Right. No, I appreciate it. It's a really good question. I think I was generally a pretty quiet kid, but I was a perfectionist, and that got me in trouble, to
Okay.
be sure. I mean, and I was cut out. I mean, when you're taller than everybody else, they tend to look to you to be in charge, and so I naturally was more or less of a leader. And sometimes I was a strident kind of leader, like a overly demanding, unsympathetic kind of leader. I
Okay.
think when I was young, um, that's definitely a fault I had to work on
Okay.
as I tried to mature. Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
Now explain this fundamentalist thing
right.
that you got involved in when you were in seminary.
Well, okay. Uh,
But you
people,
had you had told me that you were already ordained as a deacon.
correct.
Is that
Right.
right? So explain that to me. So you get your college degree, you go into the seminary, and then
Mhm.
how many years does it take you to become ordained as a deacon? Because
3 years. Generally speaking, after 3 years.
okay, and you said transitional deacon, which
Right.
means I'm a deacon, but I'm going to be a priest. Is
Correct.
that
Right.
correct? Okay.
Right.
Okay. So
Right.
what was the period when the professor said whatever they said about your fundamentalism?
Right. It was after I'd been ordained a transitional deacon, which is in a sense the definitive commitment made on the part of the man himself and on the
Right.
part of the church towards the man, that when you're ordained a deacon, it's you give yourself over and make your promises, and the church more or less accepts you as a candidate for the priesthood, with
Now,
presupposition.
unless because I kind of explored this. If I wanted to be a deacon, I could stop at being a deacon, right? I could just
Right,
say, that's as far as I'm going. I'm not going to be a priest, probably because I'm already married. Is
right,
that okay? Because we have deacons. We have deacons at both Our Lady of Nazareth and at St. Andrews. Um,
exactly.
so you can be ordained as a deacon, and that's the stopping point, or you can say I want to be a priest, and you
Right,
have to go through the deacon year or whatever to become a priest. Is that correct?
exactly. Right, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, so
yeah.
after you got ordained to be a deacon, they said, Father Mark, the deacon Mark, I guess at that point,
Right.
is a fundamentalist, and that's a bad thing, and you had to go to some kind of jury or something. So
Right.
just explain that so we can move on. Because like I said, I don't think that's significant, but we do need to address it.
Right. It was a long-term conflict between seminarians and scripture professors at the time at Catholic University. It was part of that, where the seminarians, generally speaking, were not particularly interested in the higher criticism of the scriptures that had developed in the 19th century in Germany, and we were prepared to accept what the scriptures say as being basically true, which some people, including the professors at the time, thought of as being fundamentalist, which it doesn't exactly mean that. If fundamentalist means closed-minded, unwilling to
Right, right.
consider the findings of history in your interpretation of the scriptures. I mean, I'm not one, and I don't think any of us were. We seminarians who had this conflict with the professors. But I mean, long story short, once I was ordained a deacon, one of my professors asked me point blank, "Do you believe that the flood occurred?" And I said, my answer was, "Well, I don't see how we can say that it didn't. It's what the scriptures
Right,
say." And so,
right, right.
uh, and for that
That was
response moved him to write to the archbishop that asserting that I was a fundamentalist. Yeah. So
okay. Now, did they do this on a weekly basis? Did they pick somebody out that said, I read the inerrant word of God and I believe, you even qualified it more than I would. No, the flood happened. But you
right.
said I don't know how you could argue that the flood didn't happen. But I mean, was this a regular occurrence? I mean, did they have to do this to one person every semester or something just to make a point? Or I
Uh,
mean, why
yeah.
was there any reason why you were picked to go through this? I mean, because I would assume that a lot of people would have answered that same question in the exact same way.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I stuck my neck out. I mean, certain people faulted me for not being more prudent about sticking my neck out at that point on this and being willing to have this open disagreement with this particular professor. Because it was a little, I mean, I shouldn't say everybody, but most of us seminarians, uh, we kept our heads down to get through. I mean, it was a little,
Right,
what you're saying did happen. I mean, there were
right.
exercises of purging the seminary of traditional candidates, that would happen sporadically to keep everybody afraid of being too openly traditionalist.
Okay, we're gonna set that one aside because I think because of my interest in traditional Catholicism, we're gonna set that one aside because I think you probably have more to say about that I'm very
Sure,
interested in hearing.
sure.
We'll just have to decide whether we want anybody else to hear that part of it. But that's really interesting, and um, well, yeah, we'll just set that aside. I'm not even gonna comment on it right now. Okay,
Sure.
um, so we talked a little bit about your temperament and your background, your educational background, and that kind of thing. Do you have any other traits or events in your past that kind of molded you to the person that you are today? I think people who are reflective and very introspective, which you strike me as being, periodically tend to look in their back in their past and say, that's an event that really changed me, that I had an opportunity to take a fork in a road, and I decided to take this one, and that's why I am who I am right now. Are there any other events that we missed that might be illustrative for the people who are listening to as we get into some of the current problems?
Yeah, well, I appreciate that question. I guess I would say when I first went to college, I actually didn't go to Catholic University. I went to Williams College in Northwest
Okay.
Massachusetts, where my father had gone.
Okay.
And it's to this day is known as the cranking out the most powerful people in the U.S. per capita, basically the
Really?
highest income. And um, so, I mean, definitely that I was at Williams for 3 semesters, and kind of what you're talking about is kind of what happened at that time. I mean, I just knew, and I have great affection for my friends of that time, and they're running the world in a very educated way right now.
Really? Really?
I mean, the ones who
I
are.
never even heard of the college. So where are most of those people going? Are they going into government? Are they going into industry, or where are they?
Investment banking was the big one.
Okay. Okay.
At that time, I think it still is. I mean, now that's 30 years ago, but a lot of people were going into investment banking
Right.
at that time. And,
Okay. And why didn't you stay? What happened at the end of the third semester that you said?
I mean, the whole time, I love the people as people, but it just was not. I knew I didn't belong in that world. Something was tugging me very strongly in another direction.
Right.
And I thought about things like just leaving and becoming a truck driver or maybe a police officer. I wanted to live a different kind of life than what the place was preparing people for.
Okay.
And I think that's when I first came in contact with the writings of St. Thomas Aquinas, which have been my
Okay.
companion, really lifelong companion since then.
Right.
And I just wanted to understand where he was coming from, and because it just what he was saying seemed so profound and insightful to me. Um, but I knew I needed a kind of an off ramp from the track I was on to get there.
Right. Right. And Catholic University is in the DC area. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay. So that's kind of, you came home, but then you decided that would be a good place for me to pursue what felt more real to you or more truthful to you than being at Williams College. When you were at Williams College, what were you aiming at? Because it sounds like you may have went, and I don't want to put words in your mouth. Did you go to Williams College because your father went to Williams College? Or did you go to Williams College because you wanted to be a priest?
No, I definitely didn't go to Williams College with the idea I was going to become a priest. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean,
So it was kind of a deviation, and then you finally got back to where it sounds like you were always heading.
right. Yeah, that's very well said. Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did your father have a problem with that?
At first, yeah, it's funny because I mean, at first he was really confused by what I did in my early 20s, but he loved the church. He was a faithful son of the church, and he respected the Catholic Church. So when I became Catholic and then wanted to become a priest, more and more he just accepted it and actually came to really love it. And then shortly before he died, I received him into the church. So he died a Catholic.
Oh wow! Oh wow! That must have been a proud moment for you.
It was, yeah, it
Yeah.
was really beautiful. Yeah.
Very good. Very good. Okay, so current events. Okay, and I said I was going to kind of give you some key dates, but let's talk about when you first got ordained as a priest. Now you got ordained as a deacon in 2001, 2002, somewhere in there.
2001. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then 2003 you got ordained as a priest.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and the bishop at that time, was he archbishop or was he just a bishop at that time, McCarrick?
It was Archbishop Theodore McCarrick, yeah, Archbishop of Washington, and a cardinal at the time. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and at that time, what was your relationship with Bishop McCarrick?
Friendly.
How does that work? I mean, I'm
Right.
talking about. Okay, so So you're about ready to get ordained. Do you know the bishop real well? Do they have parties for you so you can sit and talk about things and make sure that your final, when you prostrate yourself and he places his hands
Mhm.
on that you're going to be a successful priest? What's the relationship between the bishop and the seminarians or the preordained folks?
Right, sure. There's some distance in that relationship. There's a lot of people in between, like the seminary officials, and then every diocese has a director of seminarians, and bishops rely on the recommendations of those people to make decisions about ordaining the
Okay.
candidates. But to his credit, Cardinal McCarrick, perhaps looking back with some ulterior motives, he did make it something of a practice of meeting with seminarians as a group somewhat regularly. His
Okay.
predecessor in Washington, Cardinal James Hickey, would meet with us individually. McCarrick didn't do that, but he did come. Pretty much, he came to the seminary every semester, and for pizza and beer is what that was his thing. We would go
Okay.
into the basement rooms and sit around and eat pizza and drink beer, and he would talk. Is really what it came down to.
Right.
That's what he liked to do, was talk to us.
Right. Okay. And how many people would be in a seminary class? How many were in yours?
There were 9 of us ordained together my year
Okay.
for the
Okay.
Archdiocese of Washington. Yeah,
And you all go to the same mass, and you all go through. I think I've seen this at St. Andrews, but you all go through at the same time, and the bishop is responsible for giving you the blessing that's necessary for you to continue on with your ministry. Is that
correct.
correct?
Right. Hmm.
Okay. All right. At that time, when you were ordained, did you know anything about what was happening with at this point Cardinal McCarrick, as
Well,
far as the sexual abuse
sure.
issues that were popping up at that time? Was this known to the seminary? Did you have any understanding of what was going on in 2003?
Sure, I appreciate your asking. We had heard before he came that there was talk up in New Jersey about the phrase sexual abuse wasn't used, that he liked to sleep with seminarians, is what we had heard.
Okay.
And so
Right.
uh, when he actually addressed that in one of those pizza and beer sessions with us, pretty much as soon as he arrived, and
Did somebody
said
ask the
that
question? Did one of the
he
seminarians ask the question, or did he
he,
just
he
say,
brought it up
"There's
himself.
rumors out there, and I just want to clear them up"?
Right, exactly. He brought it up. No one asked him, and he as I recall, and he said that you've heard these rumors. I imagine, and they're not true. I have a lot of enemies that are trying to hurt me, and that's where this is coming from. It's not true.
Okay.
So
And did you believe that?
I chose to believe it. Most, and which is what most of us did. We talked about it, of course, my seminarian
Right.
friends and to a lot, and we decided that the right thing to do was to choose to believe him. That was the more Christian thing to do and the right thing for us to
Well,
do. So we did it.
and it sounds like you didn't have any real evidence. It was just, we hear
Correct.
this, it's a rumor or whatever, and
Right.
then the person that's sitting in front of us says that didn't happen, and you made the best choice as possible because, if it's, there's no way you could have known which way to choose to react to that.
Right. I appreciate you saying that. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. All right. So let me give you another date. So in June of, well, let me go back to this because this is just personal interest. Excuse me.
Mhm.
You were in St. Andrews when I saw you, and I think it was 2014 or 2015. You were in both parishes down south in Virginia, and then you went to St. Andrews, and then you went back.
Mhm.
Okay, was there any reason why that change was made? I mean, were they grooming you for something? What was the reason why you went from St. Francis and St. Joseph's to St. Andrews, and then you went back after a couple years?
I appreciate that question too. I mean, I wish I could say that I really understood it all fully. I don't. When I got the call about going to Roanoke, I love St. Andrews. It's a beautiful place. It's certainly a privilege to be the pastor of a place like that. There's a lot of good people there. but the call I got, I was told you're going to be the pastor of St. Andrew's and St. Gerard's, which is another parish
Right.
there in
Right.
Roanoke.
Right.
Um, and I knew,
And heavy Hispanic population, and
right.
I think Vietnamese too. Isn't that with the
Actually,
Korean?
more Vietnamese go to St. Andrews than to St.
Okay.
Gerard's, but there's
Okay.
a lot of Africans that go to St. Gerard's.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
from
so you were brought up there with the understanding that because of your bilingual background, that would be a good place for you, or what? What was the? So you don't understand the reason why you were brought to Roanoke?
well, and given that assignment, because as soon as I got the phone call, I said to the diocesan official who was calling me, this is not going to work. This is not something that one person can manage, because it's the St. Andrews is a full time job in and of itself, and so is
Right.
St. Gerard's. I mean, St. Gerard's is not as large a parish, but it's not small because there's a lot of Spanish speaking people in the area,
Right.
and it's the only place to go to mass in Spanish in the
Right.
Roanoke area.
Right.
Uh, and even though they're close to each other physically, I mean, they're about a quarter of a mile apart from each other. They both are full time jobs, and
Yeah.
I knew enough about them to know that.
Right.
So I kind of said from the beginning, I'm going to do what I'm asked to do, but this is not going to work out well. Um, I mean, I was happy. I had a happy 2 years, but I've never been so exhausted. I mean, it was utterly exhausting and taxing on me, and I miss the people of both of those parishes. But then I had 2 years there, and then when that ended, then what I had said from the beginning was actually done. I mean, the I had two successors. It
Right.
was
Right.
so. Um, and I was just as happy to go back to where I was before, where I didn't want to leave in the first place.
Right, but you don't see any other reason other than they needed you up there and you went, and then you did your 2 years time and then you went back. There was no reason why you could understand why they moved you and then returned you after that time.
I mean, I could speculate. It would be a lot of different speculations.
Not
As
necessary.
what, yeah,
Not necessary. But everything was cool in St. Joseph's and St. Francis when they pulled you out of there, was it? I
yeah,
mean, are
right, yeah,
you were in the same position then as you are now?
right, yeah. And I was perfectly happy. I had no desire to leave. I mean, I never asked to be transferred, and I
Right,
didn't. I mean,
right.
I even tried to get out of it. Like I said, I mean, for the reason that I gave, but also that I really was so happy doing what I was doing. I didn't see a reason why it would need a change.
Okay. One thing that I forgot to ask was, when did you become bilingual? Was that something that you got in college or early on? When did you get
Yeah.
the ability to speak Spanish also?
I appreciate your asking. Yeah, I took it in high school and in college, and
Okay.
used it pretty extensively in my 20s. And then my first few assignments as a priest, I didn't get a chance to use it, so it got a little stale. But then as soon as I was assigned here in 2011 and started using it again, it came back
Okay, and
with
that's
practice.
one of my desires too. I want to learn the guitar and Spanish, which
It
is
could be,
which at 63 is really, really difficult, what I'm finding out. But
right.
why did you want to learn Spanish to begin with? What was
Uh,
your Was it just travel related, or I mean, what did you know you were going to be a priest and there were a lot of Hispanic people coming into the country? What was your
right.
motivation behind learning Spanish?
Yeah, I guess I mean, I started taking it when I was like 13. But when I really got into it later on in my early 20s, studying it pretty hard and trying to learn it, it was because I knew I wanted to be a priest, and I knew that it would be
Okay,
very helpful as a priest
right,
to know Spanish. Yeah.
right. Okay, and then so when you started to interact with your parishes, whether it was in Martinsville and Rocky Mount or up here in Roanoke, you started doing this blog. Okay,
Hmm.
and you're very prolific, because
Hmm.
my understanding is you put every homily out there, and then in between uh, uh, gospels, from the mass on Sunday, you tend to kind of look at current events and things that are affecting the church, different policies and things that are in the culture and that kind of thing, and you comment on them. So you've been doing that for a long time. So do you remember when you started the blog?
In end of August 2008.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now you said that you were trained in the English department of the colleges, and you
Right.
write beautifully. You're absolutely right, beautifully. Have you written any books or anything like that, or is most of your writing? Because I want to read it because it's got to be interesting. But
Well, I
has
appreciate
most of your writing been through the blog?
it has. Yeah, it has.
Okay. And what was the purpose when you first started that? I'm guessing that there weren't a lot of priests that were out there blogging, or is that I mean, was that pretty common back in
Yeah,
2009, 2010?
it wasn't all that common back in those days. It was just starting out. I wasn't the first priest to have a blog by any means, but the whole thing was just starting. I mean, the short answer is people would ask me for copies of my homilies as they were leaving
Okay.
church pretty often,
Right.
and then I thought the easiest way to deal with that would be to have them available online. I wouldn't have to run to the Xerox machine all the time, which is what I
Right.
was having to do. So that
Right.
was the initial impetus for it.
Right. I would probably be one of those people because it it hits you one way when you hear it verbally, and then you want to go and say, "Oh, am I remembering that correctly?" And you want to go read the written word, which is,
Right.
and like I said, you write beautifully.
Yeah,
You're an amazing writer, and you obviously put an awful lot of thought into your homilies. Because now, do you write every homily and then you recite it from the pulpit?
I do. Yeah, I'm much more at ease when I have the whole thing written out ahead of time.
Yeah, yeah. That's what I experienced at St. Andrews. Okay, so we get to the point where that's tumbling along, and everybody seems to be happy with what Father Mark is writing on the blog until June or July of 2018, and that's when the public disclosure about McCarrick's misdeeds, and then also his I I don't think he's been removed from the church, defrocked. I mean, what was Pope Francis's declaration? He was supposed to go in some unknown place and do his penance, but not. He's not a priest anymore. Is that true, or is he still a priest?
He's not. He was removed from the priesthood. Yeah, in February of 2019. He was
Okay,
removed. Yeah.
okay, but there was some kind of public disclosure in the summer that.
Right. Right.
Okay, and then tell me a little bit about what that's all about, and then in your blog you have two names of two people that were young at the time that are now adults, Mike and James. So if you could just give me a couple minutes about what was disclosed about Cardinal McCarrick.
Sure. Yeah. On June 2018, the archdioceses of Washington, New York, and Newark, and the diocese of Metuchen, New Jersey, where McCarrick had been a bishop, all made an announcement announcing that that a judgment had been made that accusations that he had abused a minor were found credible, which in the way the church operates these days is the way the statement that is made. You know that what is acknowledged publicly is that there has been a credible allegation against somebody, and that leads to a suspension of whoever is credibly accused is suspended from ministry. Um, so they announced that on June 20th, and also as part of that announcement, disclosed that settlements had been made regarding sexual relations with adults at some time in the past. Very cryptic disclosure of something that was a pretty explosive thing to admit. Uh, then, not
And
long
that
after,
was from and that was from 2000 and 2004.
we later learned. I mean, at first it
Right,
wasn't
right.
even acknowledged
Right,
exactly
but
what
that
had
was that
happened.
was revealed in 2018 or whatever, that there was some situations where there was money passed to people that may have had relationships with Cardinal McCarrick, and the church paid them off, basically gave
Exactly.
them settlements to be
Right.
quiet, I guess.
Right. Right.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. And that they had been. I mean, the way that the archdiocese and the diocese announced it was pretty. It could have been interpreted either way. It could have been interpreted as consensual inappropriate relationships, but as we learned, it's far from that. I mean, it was sexual abuse of adults, seminarians or young priests, but who were under McCarrick's authority in such a way that they couldn't consent. I mean, it was certainly abusive It was
Right.
sexual abuse, albeit not of a minor.
Right.
Uh, anyway, as the summer unfolded, I mean, what was behind that announcement became clearer and clearer. That James, who later revealed his last name is Grine, who McCarrick turns out abused from age 11 onward for well over a decade, told his story to the New York Times, got it out there about how craven the way McCarrick took advantage of him what really was. And it also became clear that the accusation made against him that had produced this effect of his being suspended from public ministry was in the context of one of these reconciliation programs that the Archdiocese of New York had been running. So even that, the cover up of McCarrick's wrongs ended because the prelates running the whole thing lost control of the situation because this fellow Mike, whose story was told in the New York Times along with James, had told these lawyers in New York what had happened, who themselves were not bound by the same kind of cult of secrecy about this, and that's how it got
Well, and
out.
he was approached by the state of New York, right? Because they had gotten some information from the diocesan files that would have implicated McCarrick. Wasn't that the way Mike got connected to this whole thing?
Yeah, I don't know how.
It
I mean,
wasn't the church. It wasn't the church that came to him and said, "We have reason to believe that you were abused." It
right.
was it
It
was a
was
civil authority.
Well, it kind of in between. It was this reconciliation program that was set up by the Archdiocese of
Oh,
New York,
I got you.
but was
Okay,
run independently by these two lawyers.
okay.
And I'm not sure if there were two phases of that program. And I think to this day, I don't think we know for a fact whether Mike was in phase one or phase two, whether he was because they did go through the files and did try to contact people who had reported abuse prior to that time that had never been
Right.
followed up on. But then they also opened it up to anybody in the archdiocese who had been abused who had never reported it. They had a chance also to go to the lawyers on the Reconciliation Commission and tell their story. And I think he was in that latter category. Actually, I don't
Okay.
think he ever reported it before.
Okay. And from your blog, my understanding is that McCarrick actually baptized James
Correct.
and then
Um,
abused him because he was a family friend or something. So he was
exactly.
he was connected with that family until the abuse started when James was 11.
Correct. Right.
Okay.
And
All
it
right.
was the first baptism that McCarrick ever did when he
Oh,
was a
really?
newly
Oh
ordained
my
priest.
gosh. I didn't know that. So that was the first baptism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Um, all right. So I'm sure that had to have hit you harder than that just hit me
Right. What?
because you were ordained by this man
Right.
that you trusted.
Right.
Even though that there were suspicions whirling around, you guys trusted this person
Right.
because
Right.
of his position and because of um, I guess, the tenets of mercy and forgiveness of the church, which I think I probably would have been right there with you.
Right. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah,
So
giving the
where,
benefit of the doubt to people.
so where, so how did that hit you? What was your first thought about what you had to do about that, other than just process it yourself and say this person went from doing his first baptism to a person that he abused to rising all the way up to cardinal in the
Right.
church. Um, what was the thought process? How do you even process any of that?
Right. No, I appreciate what you're saying. And if I might, I mean, I kind of got to throw in to answer the question, everything that happened in 2002 with the Boston Globe revelations and the
Okay,
Spotlight
right.
series. And what at that time I was a transitional deacon getting ready to be ordained a priest. And we were all going through a real soul searching period about our church because that there was this perpetual cover up of sexual abuse of minors by priests, that this had gone on for decades in the Catholic Church in the United States, pretty much all over the country. That was a fact that everybody finally had inside the church had to face. And McCarrick was was the public face of the church at the time, and was very much regarded as the common sense arbiter of what's the way to deal with this problem, and guided the whole church through that period to try to regain some kind of footing as a credible institution.
And if you were in the media and you needed some kind of quote to an answer or something, you would call McCarrick and say, exactly. Here's the question. Give us the church perspective on this particular abuse situation.
Right. Exactly.
And he was kind of the spokesperson for the Catholic Church at that point, the U.S. Catholic Church.
He really was. Yeah, he really was. And so that summer was when the Dallas Charter was developed, which is inside the church, kind of a well-known thing, that it was the response of the church to the sexual abuse.
And crisis. that was a procedure document that basically said, this is what happened before 2002, after 2002, this is how we're going to stop it from occurring. Is that the essence of the Dallas Charter?
Right. We're now adopting these new binding policies that we will no longer transfer anybody who's been credibly accused. The credibly accused will be immediately suspended. There'll be no transfers. It will be much more sympathetic to victims, listen to them, and we will put in place these procedures to guard children, the protecting God's children protocols, so to speak. Were put in place, criminal background checks for everybody, mandatory training for everybody, which those in and of themselves were very good developments, and I'm sure have done a lot of good over the course of the past couple decades. Mm-hmm. But to have it hit me that we went through all that pain and then the subsequent years of, the burden of all those policies really fell on the parishes and the good people of the parishes. Anybody who wanted to be a catechist or a youth volunteer had to jump through all these hoops,
right,
and willingly did it for the safety, and it was right for them to have done it. Mm-hmm. But all these years put in by all these good people to keep the church a credible operation and protect children from abuse. All of that, when the man who was the spokesman for the church at the time was lying through his teeth about who he really was and what he was really all about, and mm-hmm. It was a crushing blow to me personally, and to the Catholics that I knew who had been through all that, along, all of us together had been through all that, recognized all that pretty quickly, and felt this profound betrayal, and that it was clear, even from the very beginning, from that cryptic announcement about the settlements, it was clear that there were those who knew about this all along and had kept it secret all along, and that added to the disillusionment, and the kind of desperate search for some solid place to stand to believe in the church. That's which is kind of what I was trying to do, what I was going through.
Okay, so when that information came out in the summer of 2018, did that go into a vacuum, and the only people that really understood it were you and the other priests on the East Coast that knew McCarrick or whatever, or did you start getting any questions from your parishioners at either of your churches, or did it? If you had not said anything about it, they wouldn't know anything about it. It was just pieces of information that very few people would have seen.
No, certainly not that. The McCarrick revelation was a bombshell, I would say, for most Catholics. Even the Spanish-speaking people knew all about it. It was on the Telemundo as well as on the American works. And so and it was followed up just, less than 2 months later by the Pennsylvania grand jury report release in August of 2018, which was a bombshell and touched people in my parishes personally, a good number of them who were from Western Pennsylvania, who knew some of the priests whose names were in that report.
Right.
So, so that,
Okay.
that
Okay. So you made a decision at that point. Okay, I got this thing called a blog.
mhm.
I need to start writing about this because you did. So I'm assuming you're an intelligent person. You decided this is the way that I'm going to start answering some of these questions. And I guess that's where all of this problem started. And I have the date September 2018. Bishop Knestout ordered removal of a post from your blog, and you complied. So you wrote something on that blog. Was it specifically about the McCarrick case?
It was about the McCarrick case, the effect of the McCarrick case and the Pennsylvania grand jury report put together, the effect on the morale of the Catholic people at the time, which was, I think, safe to say, very widespread disillusionment with the hierarchy. And so it was an open letter to the Pope begging him to ask for the resignation of all the cardinals, hold a lottery to elect cardinals from among parish priests at random, and then go ahead and resign himself so that we could have a total fresh start of leadership. And I mean, I didn't really think it was going to reach his ears. It was more of a kind of a cri de coeur on my part. It was very widely.
Cri de coeur. Is that Latin?
French, yeah. Like just
Okay.
like
So
like
define that one for me.
a
And
soul,
my audience, because nobody's going to know cri de coeur.
a soul in pain crying out.
Oh, okay,
Out
I
in
got you.
pain.
I got you.
And it certainly resonated that way with a lot of people that in my parishes and that had picked up reading my blog. I had another thing I should mention is I'd written an open letter to Theodore McCarrick at the end of July of 2018 that was a little bit viral. It got a lot of circulation on the internet, just telling him that he had no right to do what he did, to confirm all the people he did, to ordain all the people that he did. I mean, things like that.
Right.
Just so that this open letter to the Pope was kind of a follow up to that letter. Actually, it wasn't out of nowhere. It was. This is what we want. And I was writing on behalf of parish priests. Like, this is what we're going through. We have a total crisis of our people do not have any faith in the next level of leadership above us. And so why don't you do this? Why don't you just, everybody on that level of leadership, go back to where we are, pick at random from among us candidates to go where you are. Let's start fresh. And that's the letter that he made me remove.
And how did the parishioners react to first reading those two blogs? And then did they know that you removed them? Did you put on the blog, I had to remove this post, Bishop Knestout asked me, and what was the reaction of the parishioners? Because unfortunately, by your desire to have this revealed, you're also bringing your parishioners into the conversation.
Exactly.
So how did they react to that?
Right. Yeah, I appreciate the question. And I really, I mean, not to give myself a whole lot of credit, but I did try to reach a point with the bishop at that point where to spare the people some of that a little bit. I mean, I quietly removed the post at his request in immediate compliance with what he had asked me to do, but I knew that was a potentially explosive situation that could have a backfire on him among the people. So I asked him to give me the reason that he was asking me to do that, in the hope that having the reason that I could understand it, and that I could then express his reason in such a way that other people could understand it, and we could be. It didn't have to be, adversarial situation.
Right. And you needed, not to put words in your mouth, but you needed to have information about what he thought was acceptable and unacceptable on the blog related to the scandals that the church was walking into or had already experienced. So I mean, I would have asked the same thing. What can I put on the blog, and what are the things that you're gonna disagree with? Let's have a dialogue and see whether we can come to some agreement. Was that what you were trying to do at that point?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you're giving me more credit than I deserve. I mean, you just thought it through a little bit more carefully than I did. But to have a clear reason for why I was being asked to remove his post seemed to me that step one towards a better place than where we are now.
Okay. Okay.
So
So at that time, did you stop the blog? When did you stop the blog? In the fall or winter of 2000 and no, I'm
19.
sorry, at 19. But 2018, was that the last communication you had with Bishop Knestout about your blog? Because somewhere I thought that you said it's been a year since I've heard anything about this.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. So we had that interaction. We did not come to a good mutual understanding.
Okay.
I mean, and I propose that we have an annual get together of priests with the bishop for like a 3-day kind of retreat meeting thing every October. And I proposed to him that we could meet then and try to talk this whole thing over. But I never got an answer to that. And that whole occasion came and went without any further conversation between he and I. I mean, we were civil to each other at that meeting. And
Father Mark, we're going to jump to November 21st of 2019. My understanding is that you and Bishop Knestout really didn't have any substantive conversations about your blog or what you could talk about and what you shouldn't be talking about, in his opinion, between the end of September and November of the next year. That there was no other substantive conversations about what you could do and what you couldn't do. Is that correct?
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So then on November 21st, the bishop just kind of shows up in Rocky Mount.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess at the end of one of your masses says, "I need to talk to you, Mark, for 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What was the substance of that conversation?
We sat down in my office and he proceeded to read parts of a document to me that he referred to as being a decree. And I can't remember everything that he wrote. He read the end of it first, and the end of it stipulated that I would no longer publish anything on my weblog, that my weblog would no longer be on the internet in any way, that I wouldn't publish any of my opinions about anything by any social media effective immediately.
Okay, so he basically said the blog is done. If you want to keep doing what you're doing, the blog is done. Do you know what got him to the point where he got in the car from Richmond and drove to Rocky Mount to give you that 15-minute meeting? Did you say something on your blog that was personally offensive to him or anything? Did he tell you why he was there and what prompted his drive for 3 hours probably more than 3 hours from Richmond to Rocky Mount?
Yeah, it's 3.5. I mean, I guess when I had inquired about what he wanted to meet with me about prior to committing to coming, I don't think that he took that well. I think that's part of it. And I don't think he took well and what I had blogged about the bishop's visit to Rome. The American bishops were in the middle of their every 5-year visits to Rome at the time. And I regret to some extent the way that I expressed myself in anger in one of my posts. And I did apologize in a subsequent post for that, because I was extremely angry at the spectacle of the American bishops really, forgive me for putting it this way, but kind of fanboying the Pope. I mean, wanting to have selfies taken with the Pope and put it on their Twitter feeds without any engagement whatsoever of the problem of the still outstanding McCarrick report, and not a word about it with him. That just really made me angry, and so I did express myself in anger in a way that I shouldn't have, and I owed my readership an apology, and I did apologize for it. That might have had something to do with his coming. That did bother him, that I had been so angry about that.
Okay, but it sounds like if it was it indeed a 15-minute meeting?
No, it was closer to 40 when
Okay.
everything was said and done.
Did you guys have any kind of back and forth or understanding about anything that you wrote and why it was offensive? I mean, did you know at this time what the bishop was upset with you about? Or
Yes and
was
no. I mean, he read from this document, which as I recall, was about 2.5 pages. I never got a full-on frontal look at the document. I'm not sure he read every word of it. He did refer to at least one post, I think more than one, though I couldn't be sure because it was all coming at me pretty fast. And
right,
he misinterpreted something that I had written. That was clear to me as I was listening to him read. The whole time he was reading to me, I had in my mind, when he's done reading this to me, he's going to hand it to me, and I'm going to have a
right,
chance to go over it a little more carefully and understand what he's saying a little
right,
bit better, react to it in a way that would make sense, because I was not getting every word of it by any means.
right.
So then when he didn't do that, when he then said, "You will not receive," I was presented. The Vicar General was there also. He presented me with a piece of paper to sign, affirming that I had heard the document read to me. And again, I assumed that I was going to be handed the copy as soon
Right,
as I signed that
right,
document.
right.
So I wouldn't have signed it otherwise. But as soon as soon as I had signed that document, then the bishop says, "You're not going to receive a copy of this." And I was stunned. That stunned me.
Yeah, I come from a corporate world, and it would shock. I don't know. I couldn't even imagine having somebody sign something that says, "I heard this," because normally you're read it, or they give you time to read it like a contract,
Mhm.
with some kind of expert next to you that says, "Okay, here's what this word means." Before you sign it, you have a complete understanding of what you're signing. But do you know if is that part of the way that the Catholic Church does that? Because it sounds very, I don't know how you could ever process that. Okay.
Exactly. Right.
And when you signed it, and then he said, "You don't get a copy of this," I would have thought, well, damn, why did I sign that thing?
Right. Yeah, and that is what I thought. I mean, because though I was so taken aback at that whole approach, because it is, I would say, totally foreign to the way that canon law would stipulate that the church should operate. I mean, there is a provision in canon law for delivering precepts, decrees orally when there's a grave reason to do so. But I consulted with a couple of canon lawyers just shortly after that, and none of them had any thought as to what the reason in this case would be. I mean, apparently the bishop objects to any of his documents being published. I mean, and I had published one of his letters on my blog. He apparently objected to that.
Right.
Um,
And he
so,
subsequently asked you not to publish some letters
right,
later in the spring. Am I right on that?
that's right,
That eventually
right,
he said don't publish any more of my letters, and you complied
right,
with that. You
that's
you
correct,
you
right,
stopped you stopped. Okay, so the whole idea of the verbal thing. I guess I bring it back to a corporate situation. When I was in human resources, if I had to correct somebody about a disciplinarian situation, I would do it verbally, but then I would write it down,
hmm,
and then I would have them sign the written document that says,
right.
you've been told about this. Here's what the specifics are. You've signed and you've read it and you understand it, and don't do it ever again. But it doesn't sound like that's the way that was presented to you.
Exactly. That's another point that these canon lawyers made to me when I asked them about this. That the whole idea of it was that I was supposed to be complying with a directive. And it's a little unreasonable to expect somebody to comply with a directive that they're read in a tense situation
Right,
and then not given a copy of.
right,
It's kind of the opposite of how you're going to effectively direct somebody if
right.
you really want them to comply with what you want them to comply with.
Okay, now my understanding is also you could have went to the diocesan office, pulled that document, but you
Hmm.
could have only read it. You couldn't have taken a picture with your phone And the first thing I thought of, do they take your phone away when you're looking at your own personnel file?
I guess they
Because
do.
we never did that at Allstate. I mean, if you wanted to see whatever was in your personnel file, that was yours, and you could see it. Whether you lost an evaluation or something, you wanted to go and you could take copies of everything because it's your document. It's not.
Right.
It wasn't Allstate's, but it doesn't sound like that works in the Richmond Diocese.
Correct. Yeah. Unfortunately, I think that is a general practice in the diocese, at least in the United States, where the priests have these files that the bishop regards not as the priest but as his, and controls that even our own access to our own files.
Right. Okay. That's interesting, troubling, and interesting. Okay. So later in December, you write to the bishop to ask him to reconsider, and then you're set up for a February meeting. That you're going to go to a February meeting. And at this point, are you still blogging at this point, or you've shut down the blog?
I shut it down. He left my office with the instruction that I did get it. Your blog will be shut
that's
down
what he said first, right?
immediately.
He said your blog is dead, right
Right.
at the top. So you
Right.
understood that part.
Right. So I complied immediately. He walked out, and that's the first thing I did was remove my blog. I couldn't completely comply because there's no way to get out into the internet and remove every vestige of everything you've ever published. That's actually possible.
Right.
But as far as anybody having access to my blog,
right,
I was able to render that impossible, which is what I did.
Okay, so you arrange this meeting in February, and I'm hopeful that you and the bishop get together and you figure out all this stuff and you get your blog back and go back to being the great priest that your parishioners think you are. Right? Or
because of their kind-heartedness. Yeah, no, it didn't work out that way. Unfortunately, it was. I mean, we had a chance to talk. I apologize for having offended him, which I clearly had done. And he said he didn't think that things went the way that he would have liked them to have gone either, and I appreciated him saying that. He and I talked, just the two of us, for a little while, and at the conclusion of that part of the conversation, I really thought, we're getting somewhere where this could really turn out. We could take a step forward here. Let's put it that way.
Right.
But then we went into part two of the meeting, which involved the vicar general and a couple of parishioners as well, and in which the bishop had a notebook which he said contained the blog posts to which he objected, with tabs marking the spots where he thought there was objectionable material. And he had that in front of him at the meeting in my office back in November, the same notebook apparently. And I'd asked if we could go through it then, and he refused to do so then. But he had it in front of him when he and I were together, and he said, "Well, let's go into the other room and we'll talk about this." And he had the notebook, and I thought, okay, now we're going to have our chance to have that talk that I had hoped that we could have had a long time ago. But then we proceeded to have about 45 minutes of discussion in the boardroom, so to speak, of his office suite, with the vicar general and the two parishioners who had come with me, who he invited to speak and give their piece. And they both spoke, I thought, pretty eloquently about how they saw the situation. And then the second one of them said, "Can we please open this notebook and go through it and talk about the posts that you have a problem with?" And again, he said that he wouldn't be doing that.
Right.
And then he thanked them for coming, thanked us all for coming, and then issued his decision, which was that I was not going to have a blog anymore still, but that I could put my homilies on the parish websites. And then we left amicably, and then a journalist called me in the car to tell me that she had gotten a statement from the Diocese of Richmond about the meeting already. And that went on, and this statement went on about how priests don't need blogs; they have other ways of communicating with their people. And
so, are you indicating that statement that went to the press was already written prior to your meeting, or could it have been put together right after your meeting?
If it had been put together right after a meeting, I mean, they did it in record time. I mean, it's conceivably possible, but seems pretty unlikely.
Do you have a perspective on why The bishop did not want to talk about specifically that part of your blog. Because I'll give you the corporate perspective. I'm your boss. I don't like it. Stop doing it. I'm not going to get into a discussion about what I don't like about it, but because I'm your authority figure, we're not going to go down that route just because I don't want you to do it. So you can do this part of the blog, which is good, but this part, which I don't like very much, you're going to get rid of, and we're not going to have a conversation about it. Is that a fair assessment, or is there some other reason why it seems like you were not able to have a collegial conversation with the bishop or your boss about that part of the blog?
I mean, what you just said, I think, is a possible, very straightforward and understandable explanation for it. I mean, that of an exercise in authority and cooperation on the part of a subordinate, where you don't burden the superior with getting into a whole lot of nitty gritty when it's the superior thinks he's made himself perfectly clear about what
Right.
he has in mind and what he doesn't. But in this case, I mean, I would say for my own defense, I mean, it's a little bit different because we're talking about, I mean, the institution is itself based on the credibility of what we say, and the credibility of what we say is in question here, and that's what these posts were about, and trying to deal with, um, and and he's not quite my boss in that same way, since we're all servants of the gospel of Jesus Christ, and that's what we're really supposed to be giving to people. And this was I was
Mhm.
trying to give it, and give it in a way that made sense to me, that from my point of view was consistent.
Right. Okay. Now, um, somewhere in this timeline, Bishop Knestout had to write um, a statement because he was the secretary for Cardinal McCarrick, and maybe he wasn't even a cardinal at the time. He might have been, I don't know what he, maybe he was the archbishop or something. But Bishop Knestout was a secretary for McCarrick for a year,
Mhm.
and he put a statement out, which I remember reading in the Catholic Virginian.
Mhm.
And I'm not trying to suppose anything, but is there any other reason why you would believe that Bishop Knestout would not want you challenging the church in the way that they handled the sexual abuse scandals?
Right. Okay. I appreciate what you're saying. Uh, that when he made that statement, I think it was August 1st, 2018, and
Okay.
McCarrick was a cardinal, because McCarrick became a cardinal just weeks after he came to Washington. So
Okay.
pretty much the whole time as Archbishop of Washington, he was a cardinal. Uh, and it was a very delicately worded statement that Bishop Nesta put out there on August 1st, 2018. I mean, you could speak for yourself. I'd be interested to hear what you had to say about this. I know in our parishes, it surprised a lot of people in this way, namely, why are you saying this now? Who asked you to say this? It was
Right.
a defense prior to an accusation, which seemed strange. And it also was it could be parsed. It was clearly written in a way that was lawyerly, where there were huge
Right.
holes in what he wasn't saying and what he might have known that he
Right.
that he wasn't even getting into.
Right.
Um,
Well,
so
my perspective was I was in HR for 26 years with Allstate, and
mhm,
almost every day I dealt with lawyers,
mhm,
and I understand how you can not tell the truth without lying. I guess
mhm,
that's the best way I can say it.
right,
But everything I read these days is written like that. So it
right,
was when I read it up until the point that I got involved in your situation. I just thought, this is a CYA kind of letter, cover your butt kind of letter,
mhm,
that somebody's going to ask me the question and I'm going to be able to say, well, here's the statement. Just go read the statement. I'm not going to talk to you about it,
right,
which is kind of the way things are done these days. So
right, sure,
I just wanted to make sure that when you started writing the blog, your I want to know where your heart was, okay? Because I think one of the things that you could be criticized about is the fact that as soon as you started doing that, you were doing it for several different reasons. The first reason was your parishioners were talking about it, and you were trying to answer some questions that were coming to you in a way that everybody could understand it. And for my personal belief, I think that's the way we do things. I think you live in the truth. You just say, here's what happened. This is what we know. Let's have a discussion about it, and I'll help you deal with it. But I want to make sure that there was in no way anything vindictive towards Bishop Knestout or the hierarchy, other than the fact that it appears a lot of people knew what was going on and never really stepped up and said, okay, we need to stop this, and these people need to go, or we have to go talk to the people who were abused or whatever. I'm just trying to clear up the fact that, Bishop Knestout was involved in this thing, but that was not the reason that your blog was written. Your blog was written for the parishioners that you were dealing with.
Sure. No, I appreciate what you're saying. And I mean, I can't absolve myself of anger towards certain prelates over the course of the past couple of years that I certainly have felt. And at that point in time, I felt a great deal of anger toward Cardinal Donald Wuerl. And to this day, still do.
And he was the replacement for McCarrick.
Correct. Right. Yeah. Who has become, by document, it's a documented fact that he knew about McCarrick having taken advantage of seminarians, abused his authority over them. Before Wuerl even became the Archbishop of Washington, he was aware of this, and that even through 2018 and then into early 2019, he was misleading the public about that. And one of the victim who he knew about came forward, came to him, tried to get him to admit the truth to him, and they could have a conversation, because this man is a loyal son of the church himself. Robert Siolek is his name. And he wanted to make peace with Donald Wuerl, even though he didn't understand what Donald Wuerl was saying publicly about what he knew about McCarrick. When he sealed the victim, whose settlement document Donald Wuerl had seen, knew that what Wuerl was saying wasn't true. He went to Wuerl himself, tried to have a straightforward conversation with him, and Wuerl wouldn't even be straight with him, and then wouldn't be straight with the Washington Post about him when asked about his meeting with him.
Right.
So Siolek had to throw up his hands and say, this man I don't understand why he can't just tell the truth about all this. And that's where things stand as far as where Donald Wuerl is, as far as living in the truth of what he knew about McCarrick and when. So, I mean, and in August 2018, I mean, to give myself a little bit of credit, I mean, I was angry, but Donald Wuerl was the Archbishop of Washington, whose people had just learned that their previous archbishop, the clergy and the people had just learned that the previous archbishop was a dangerous predator, a criminal fleeing justice from the day that he showed up. And instead of focusing on that, Donald Wuerl was completely consumed with focusing on himself, because his credibility had been thrown into question by the Pennsylvania grand jury report. So instead of really shepherding anybody, he went into corporate defense mode, and that really made me angry. But I mean, in all honesty, I mean, people and parishioners will bear me out on this. I mean, numerous parishioners came to me after that Knestout statement of August 1st, 2018, about what he didn't know about McCarrick, saying, don't you think he knew something? You're the one who was there among us, because I was a priest of Washington at that time. Don't you think that he's not telling the truth? And my answer always was, I don't know. It's conceivably possible, because to this day, I think it is probable that McCarrick never abused anybody as Archbishop of Washington. I don't think that happened. I think there's a couple people he thought about grooming, but then
that was after 2013, I think. Is that right?
Well, no, actually, he came to Washington in December of 2000.
Yeah, but you're saying he probably didn't abuse the supposition is he didn't abuse anybody after he became Archbishop of Washington, which was 2013.
No, year 2000.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
Yeah. He all his crimes had been done before then.
Prior to that. Yeah. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
But
we don't know that for a fact. But I mean, at that time, I thought that was likely. It seemed likely to me, because I didn't know of anybody who'd been abused by him. Like I said, I saw him trying to groom a couple guys. Looking back, I see that's what it was. But I don't think that ever went anywhere. I mean, I don't know, but that's what I was saying to people was it is conceivably possible that Bishop Barry Knestout really didn't know anything about this. We don't have any evidence to support the idea that he did. So,
Right.
What's the point in speculating about that when there's other people? It was right around that time that the Vigano memo was released. So Vigano was where he was revealing things that he knew and had known for some time about
Right.
McCarrick and the other people who had known, and that all needed to be sorted out pretty carefully. And none of that touched Barry Knestout directly at all. So, I
Right.
mean, I can say I felt no anger towards Barry Knestout at all. I mean, we had been very friendly when he arrived in Richmond, because we joked with each other about how he was following me, because we knew each other from Washington. I'd been down here for 7 years. Here he was. Um, so there was, from my point of view, we didn't have any issues personally, he and I.
Well, and maybe we don't even speculate on why he disliked some of the posts that you put on the blog, although you were attacking the hierarchy of the
Right,
church and some
right,
of the failings of the hierarchy, which never makes leadership happy.
right,
Okay,
right.
from my corporate experience, you don't, if
Yeah.
you're going to say something bad about one of the people that are above your head, you're probably going to be called into somebody's office to be told, you don't want to say that. Whether it's true or not doesn't really matter. You just don't want to say that because the chain of command and breaking down the unity or whatever other language you want to use.
Right.
Okay, so we're at the point now where let's jump ahead to okay. So you have the February meeting. You tried to write another letter in March 13th, which
Right.
appears to be kind of a dividing point where I think it seems to me that you've exhausted the collegial approach with Bishop Knestout, either because of his reticence to talk to you about what the blog was, that it was pretty much the point where you were saying, I need to get the blog going again, and one of the driving factors was the coronavirus.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay, so talk a little bit about that February to March area after your February meeting. When did you get the point where you said, okay, I need to put this blog out there because I have no connection with my parishioners now because of the fact that they can't come to church?
Right. Sure. Excellent question. And I mean, to be perfectly honest about the whole thing, I mean, I kind of have to frame it like this. I mean, after that meeting in February, it was pretty clear to me and those who had gone to the meeting with me and other people that I was talking to about this, that as far as reaching some kind of meeting of the minds with Barry Knestout, that it did not seem to be working. That we hadn't really made any noticeable headway on engaging the subjects at
And at
hand.
that point, you still had no blog. You were
Correct.
under the order of you don't blog, Father Mark. You just go off and continue to do what you're doing, but you do not have a blog. Or was it you have a blog but only the homilies?
No, no blog. Yeah,
No blog.
he said he had made the accommodation of them. I could put my homilies on the parish websites, and we were doing that. And
Oh, on the
um,
parish website, but no blog. I got you. I
exactly.
got you.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um, so, I mean, I was trying. I spent a few weeks praying through it, trying to sort out what I ought to do, what was the right thing to do, um, and I guess I got to the point where I knew that the right thing to do was not to submit indefinitely to this silencing order that I had gotten. That was not the right thing for me to do. It was a betrayal of a lot of myself, what I stood for, and what a lot of people uh, had come to believe in me that I stood for, and so I couldn't honestly do that. So I guess sometime late February, I came to the point of the day will come when I'm going to turn this blog back on, but it could be as long as a year from now. I got to wait and see what what happens and where I am, because I mean, I was happily doing my parish ministry, and a lot of things were happening, and planning for the future and getting ready for Lent and Easter and all those things. And
Mm-hmm.
um, so I guess I was waiting for some kind of sign from the Lord as to what would be the precipitating situation that I would act and turn my blog back on, and what exactly would I say, and how would I re-engage the conversation that the blog was. And when the virus, the reality of the virus, it hit me, I guess, in early March, what we were looking at. I think that we were facing an extended shutdown where we were not going to be having masses for some extended period of time. So I recognize that as some kind of sign, that when here I have an already cultivated, well-developed means of communicating with people, that all I have to do is flip this tiny little switch and it's back on. That was the time had come for me to do that. So that's when I worked on writing that letter to explain where I was coming from, and in the hopes that he would hear it, and we could really move on and leave the whole unfortunate controversy behind us, because it seemed, in light of the fact that what we were looking at as a pastoral reality in our parishes, which continues to this day, that getting people back to church is just not going to be, it hasn't been easy, not going to be easy. That this controversy we had about the blog seemed like a sideshow compared to what we were up against. And
Right.
I was hoping that he would see it that way too.
So he didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then shortly after that, he wrote a letter to the parishioners directly. And he said some things that were not very kind, actually. And this is the letter, and it's about 3 pages of some specific things that he didn't like about the blog, which it sounds like you were trying at least for probably 6 months or so to try to get him to talk to you about.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
But
Yeah.
he chose to write this directly to your flock. And so you wrote a letter on March 13th. He wrote a letter on March 19th. Did this one get into the paper too, or does this one just go to the parishioners?
No, that's the one he insisted that he insisted the Martinsville Bulletin publish that very letter right there. Yeah.
Okay, so this is the one that says a whole bunch of bad stuff about you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So what was your, I don't even know what question to ask Father Mark, because if I read any of this, okay, so let me formulate the question this way. So you have this parish, 2 parishes, that has English-speaking people and Spanish-speaking people, and from all accounts, from all the comments on your blog, I could find one person that wasn't with you and supportive of you. And I don't even know if that person is still in your parish, but you're doing your thing down in Martinsville and Rocky Mount, and it seems like everything is working really, really well. And you're trying to help these people get comfortable with the church, and you're doing your thing, and things seem to be going really, really well. You start questioning an area of the hierarchy's leadership that Bishop Knestout doesn't like, or maybe his boss's boss doesn't like. I don't know how high this up goes, but I'm trying to deal with it from a corporate standpoint. And then my boss writes a letter to my employees or to my parishioners, to my flock, that says some things that are pretty derogatory towards their priest, to their father. How did that sit? I mean, how do you process that and not? I'm not as calm a person as you seem to be. How did that hit you? Especially when you saw that it actually went into the at least one of the church's local newspaper,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and that you were you were basically, and is this the one where you were taken out of the church, or is this just the one that is this the one that tried to get your parishioners to stop you from doing the blog?
I
Or
guess
that
so.
was
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that appears to be what he intended with that particular letter.
to put pressure on you to stop the blog because you disobeyed him at the beginning. But
Apparently,
okay.
right? Yeah.
Okay. All right, now shut up. So
I mean, I appreciate
go
it.
back to, and this is the sad thing about it is this was dated on my birthday. So I'm sitting there
Is that
going,
look at your
okay,
birthday?
so if I
Your
got this
birthday.
on my birthday, I'm sitting there going, really? That's my boss. You're talking to my employees, and I don't need you talking to my employees because you have nothing. You have no clue about what kind of relationship we have. And if it was a good one, which it sounds like yours was, this is not helpful. This is not helpful for your relationship with the other children of God. So what
Right.
was your initial reaction on that day?
I appreciate that, and I'm glad to know your birthday is St. Joseph's feast day because
Exactly.
that's nice.
Mom
Yeah.
didn't like Joey, so she named me Dale. So my confirmation name is Joseph. So she didn't
Right.
want it. She didn't want it Joey. So
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Right. Well, I mean, it's funny the way you put the question at the very beginning. I mean, the first thing that ran through my mind, to be perfectly honest with you, was thank God this whole business is only going to affect people who speak English, because there was no Spanish version of his
wow,
letter.
wow,
And so that was actually kind of a relief to me that it would not that it would only affect English speaking people, and even that it struck me pretty quickly that most of the English speaking people would not be able to get from the beginning to the end of that letter. I mean, they
yeah,
just weren't reading
yeah.
the
It's
whole.
pretty deep. Yeah, it's pretty deep, and there is a lot of reading there.
So so
But
yeah, I mean,
what?
go
How did your? Okay, so how did your from an emotional standpoint, because that's where I start. I think I always get to the intellectual part of it and to the rational part of it. But frankly, because of my mother's genes, I start at the emotional part of it. So
ahead.
what were your emotions when you read this thing? What did you think about your boss when you had been trying to work through this thing in a very collegial way, and then all of a sudden he's sending a letter to your parishioners that is talking about, um, here I'll just read one part of it. By contrast, for more than a year, in fact, since the fall of 2018, in my judgment, Father Mark White has worked against the unity of the church, promoted disrespect for the Holy Father, the church hierarchy, his bishop, and has demonstrated a will adverse to obedience to the bishop of this diocese, which he took an oath to uphold at his ordination. Okay, hopefully that wasn't hurtful, but how did you feel when you first read that?
Right. Well, I mean, you said it. I mean, it was extremely hurtful. I mean, it was a blow to me emotionally because I mean, he's coming at me where I live. I mean, that I love the church, I love the communion of the church, and that I'm devoted to what I promised to be devoted to.
Mm-hmm.
That's who I am. That's my life. I'm not, I'm not saying I haven't made mistakes. I'm not a great priest. I do the best I can, but he's punching me right, in the sternum. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
stabbing me there, really. I mean, you
Right,
know,
right.
so that was my first reaction. But thank God. I mean, this whole time I've had good people to talk to try to get me through the emotions and see things as rationally as I could. And so I actually wrote to the parishioners just in English because I didn't want to even confuse anybody dealing with things in Spanish, but um, that at least now I knew what the posts were that he objected to. I mean,
Right.
that was a step in the right direction. I was grateful for that. I expressed my gratitude for that
Mm-hmm.
because that was something that I wanted to know for some time, um,
Which
and that.
very, very easily could have been done in that room in February or
Mhm.
earlier or later in the fall behind closed doors so the parish didn't have to read this.
Right.
Okay, and I'm trying not to take sides on this, but it was up to the leader to be able to say, here's what's in that big notebook.
Right.
Let's sit down and talk about it and come up with some kind of accommodation for you to process all this stuff and help your parishioners at the same time without removing your ability to speak.
Right.
So
Well said. Well said. Yeah, and that all ran through my mind too. I mean, it seemed like a setback in that way that it was something we could have had just between us, and it really changed the dynamic of the whole situation, because it had, I was hurt myself, but I also felt hurt on behalf of the people, because the people were put in a position that it was totally unfair to put them in, where they were supposed to be convincing me to do something that, which they, for the most part, they didn't think was right. And they never signed up to talk me out of blogging in the first place. I mean, that's not the kind of relationship that a priest and his people would generally have. So that bothered me too.
Right. Okay. And then my understanding is that this letter and that incident prompted you to get the canon lawyer, Michael Podesky, and he wrote a letter basically kind of outlining what have been the problems throughout the situation, right? And and that's also on your blog, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So that went to a cardinal, correct?
No, that initial letter just went to Bishop Knestout.
Okay.
Because Michael's first intervention in this whole situation, he'd been advising me all along. But at that point, when the bishop published this letter, Michael and I decided, okay, that you would handle my relations with the bishop is probably the smarter move at this point, because the bishop and I are dealing directly with each other is not getting us anywhere. So he went through the letter that the bishop published. And at that time, that was private correspondence on Michael's part towards the bishop, asking the bishop to correct the record about things that he said there that weren't true.
Right.
And that Michael never got a response to that. And meanwhile, I just tried to put out. I thought the best thing to do is make as publicly available the content that the bishop is referring to here, make that as widely and as easily available as I can to the people to read for themselves, to see if they agree with the bishop's assessment of it. So I just put, for my part, I just put the links up on a page that was easily accessible to people on my blog.
Right. Yeah, and that's how I got most of this information. If anybody wants to go get it, they can find it pretty easily. And if this gets posted, we'll put links on it. All right. So then on April 13, the bishop removes you from both parishes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, and then you write a subsequent letter to both your parishes and say that I'm still your pastor until the full legal procedures run its course. It would take some time, and that's when Michael wrote the revocation and/or emendation of the decree. Emendation. I'll have to look that word up too, because I don't know that one either. Emendation of the decree, removing. So he's trying to reverse the bishop's removal of you as pastor of the two churches.
Correct. Right. Yeah. On the ground.
Go ahead.
On the grounds that there are procedures that have to be followed to remove a pastor against his will, and none of those had happened.
Right. Okay. Now at this time, you're still living in the two rectories, right? You spend half the time in Martinsville, half the time in Rocky Mount.
That's right. Yep. Okay. Yeah. I was still pursuing this because it was all done under Michael's advice, and it was solidly grounded advice that the way an appeal of a removal from a pastorate works is that the removal is suspended when the appeal is registered until the conclusion. So I was asserting that I wasn't trying to get in the bishop's face there per se. I was just saying what Michael told me is the legal procedure. So that I was trying to help the people not panic and say, at least for the time being, everything's going to stay the way it was.
Right. So
until
you believe that you were gonna still be in the rectory, were you still gonna do masses, you were able to do confessions, all the sacraments you were still responsible for while the appeal process was moving forward.
correct. Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Um so I'm gonna jump ahead to the point where the administrator, who is Kevin Sedgerbloom, Father Kevin Segerbloom,
Cerebellum. Mhm.
Segerblom from St. Andrews, is responsible for administering the two churches, but you don't believe that's necessary because of the fact that you're still the pastor, because of your belief about the appeal process.
Correct. Yeah,
So
that became a pretty clear bone of contention pretty quickly.
yeah,
Um,
so he tried to call you, or he came down and said, I'm going to do the masses, and you said, no, I'm still going to do the masses, and you did the masses for a couple weeks.
right. Hmm.
Correct, and he kind of complied with that. He just kind of put it off, and later on he tried again, I guess the next week, to come down and do the masses.
Right. It was during that period that the bishop himself made another surprise visit to Rocky Mount.
Right.
To celebrate
That's
the
that's what
mass.
I'm getting to. April 18th. When I first started understanding what you were getting involved in, the first thing that I watched was Bishop Knestout's Sunday Vigil Mass, where he was celebrating and you were co-celebrating back behind him, and then he gave the homily about this whole old wound, which was a word that was new to you, I guess.
Mhm.
So he came, and you didn't know he was coming. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, I had no
Okay.
idea.
So he
Yeah.
just walks in before mass. Now this was a streamed mass, right? So
Correct.
there was a camera there and probably a camera person, some
Mhm.
technology person, and he came in and basically said, "I'm doing mass for you today."
Correct. Yeah. Right. And
Okay.
Father
Did
said,
he ask you to celebrate, or did you say no? That's fine. I'll co-celebrate. Was that an agreement that you asked to do that, or did he say, "Hey, come on, co-celebrate with me"?
he told me that I was permitted to celebrate if I so chose.
Okay. All right. Did you know what was going to happen in that mass? Because that was the most uncomfortable 45 minutes of me, and and I had nothing to do with it other than I knew you as my priest from 2014 and 15, and I thought you did the most. I think it's probably, with the exception of a Latin mass, it is the most reverent mass that I've ever seen. Okay, and I enjoyed you doing it. But then I'm sitting there going, okay, he's standing in the back, and Bishop Knestout is going to say something after, when he gets to the point where he's ready to do his homily. Um, so how did you feel about that? And how did you stay so calm?
I appreciate you asking. I mean, that was a gift from the Lord, I guess. I mean, I love the Mass, and he's the bishop. I mean, the basic realities of the church were on my mind. I mean, for a priest to get celebrate a Mass with his bishop is a beautiful thing, in and of itself. It was a chance for me to do that. I tried to focus on that.
Right.
And I wanted, if he chose whatever he would choose to say, I wanted to hear it. I wanted to take it in and be willing to listen to it. Um, and I mean, I also knew that the whole thing was confusing to everybody involved and the people on the other end of the phone. I mean, my heart was going out to the people that were looking at this on the other end of that phone,
Right.
and I just wanted to be there for them in the best way that I could. And I seemed like just staying calm, doing my thing was what I could do. So that's what I tried to do. Oh.
Okay. Well, God bless you. I don't know. I would have had to go through seminary probably 3 or 4 times to be able to stand and listen to the homily of that thing. I think I probably would have missed every single word because I would have been praying so hard that I didn't I
Yeah.
didn't do something that I really
Yeah,
shouldn't have done.
God, Lord
Um,
bless you for that, Dale. Bless you for that.
so then after that, Father Kevin comes down and he tries to do mass a couple weeks in a row, and eventually you get to the point where that I guess on May 6th, the bishop published a notice to the diocesan website that I'm now prohibited from celebrating the sacraments and ministering in any way.
Mhm.
And then I think, was that before or after the cardinal denied your appeal?
That was before.
I guess it was
Considerably before,
before.
yeah. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, about a month and a half before.
Okay. So then my understanding is that even though you couldn't celebrate masses, you were still standing out in front of the parishes to welcome the people into your church where you couldn't celebrate mass with them.
Yes, yeah. When the time came
Yeah.
that we started having the public masses again,
Right.
which
Right.
was I think a week or two later, it occurred to me that that would be the right thing for me to do. I mean, the best place for me to be when the people were coming back to mass was at least because I guess we had mentioned that in the meantime, just a few days after I was suspended, the keys were changed on the buildings, and I was ordered out of all the properties, not to
Right.
return to any of the properties. So I didn't want to cause any kind of public disturbance about that. But I thought if I stand on the edge of the property line, then I'm not really disobeying that, but I'm giving the people a chance to see me and me them. And because for
Right.
that their experience was coming back to mass for the first time in 3 months, um, and that I mean that was a kind of big experience for them in and of itself. And I didn't. It struck me that it would be worse for me not to be there than for me to be there. And the way for
Right.
me to be there was to stand at the entrance.
Right. And I was shocked that somebody would actually go to the civil authorities to put basically a restraining order, a no trespass document
Mm,
for a priest that
right.
cares as much about the parish and the parishioners as you do. I don't understand that. And okay, so let's get to the big questions here. So why are you doing all this? Okay, I know that there's a lot of easy ways out of this thing.
Mm,
Okay, but you're choosing not to take them. And I really want to understand why this particular truth is so important to you and why you're willing to put your career and your life and I think it's your love on the line.
mm. Bless you, Dale. I appreciate you, and that's very insightful way because it is my love. I mean, um, well, I mean, to me, from my point of view, I'm not trying to be a hero here. I mean, all I've got to do what seems to me to reflect my love of Jesus Christ, who he truly is, who he is in our lives, how he communicates with us, how he reaches us, and draws us into the mystery of eternal life, which he has won for us. And that way is through the church, is through the celebration of the liturgy of the church and the sacraments, the grace of the sacraments of the church. Um, and so, I, from my point of view, I've just been trying to be faithful to that the whole time, and I'm still trying to be faithful to that. But I've also got to be myself. I mean, he chose me as one of his priests. Uh, and even though the sacrament was given to me by Theodore McCarrick, who was a criminal fleeing justice at the time, Catholic doctrine teaches I received holy orders anyway. I mean, with all the graces that go along with that. And he chose, and I'm a writer. That's who I am. I deal with things by writing out my thoughts, and uh, I'm a pretty gregarious person. I know a lot of people. A lot of people know me. And so for me to be in communication with a lot of people is my life. I mean, I don't have a vocation to a contemplative life in a monastery. I mean, I kind of wanted one. I actually tried that out. Like I went to a Trappist monastery in my late 20s and really wanted to be a Trappist, but
Oh, really?
he didn't cut me out for that, right? I mean, he cut me out to be with people, communicating with people, trying to explain things to people, listening to people,
Mm-hmm.
trying to foster understanding and communication. And to me, that does seem like the answer. Not that I have the answer, but that all of us would communicate openly about what we're dealing with when it comes to our faith and love for the church and desire to be in communion with the church, that we as a church can recover from these terrible scandals that we've suffered over the past generation and a half, the more we do that, not the less. And so, uh, I mean, I don't want to be, I don't want to be an outlier. I don't like being a suspended priest. I don't like being seen as an adversary of my own bishop, but I can't give in to an order to shut up. I mean, I just, as a human being, I can't do that. And I feel like I'd be betraying what I stand for if I did. And I'd be betraying the best interests of the church if I did, because I'm still hopeful that there's a way forward here that's going to be for the good.
Okay, if you were in just a corporate setting, because all corporations have hierarchy, would you have made the same decision to go and try to challenge the hierarchy for something that they should have been doing that they didn't? Does it have any difference between the church and Allstate?
Right. Yeah. No, that's an excellent question. Uh, and I mean, I'm sure Allstate's a good company because you worked for it for all those years. And I
Well,
know,
they were very kind to me and my family. Let's put it
right,
that way.
yeah,
But
and I
it's
know,
any company. It could be State Farm or General Motors or whatever. Is there a difference between that corporate situation? Because that's the way I've been trying to come into this conversation. Or is it
sure.
different because we're dealing with religion?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I would say it is different because we are talking about the salvation of souls, right? I mean, the, what if someone, like you were dedicated to the idea for years that it's better for someone to get their insurance in Allstate than it is a State Farm, and to making it be a better deal for them. But State Farm was out there, and the people that were going to State Farm or Geico were probably getting halfway decent insurance, and were doing that.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
was not, they were not going to hell because
right,
they
right.
insured themselves through Geico.
Right. But
But
there
we're
was just as many hierarchy problems in Geico and State Farm as there probably were in Allstate.
of
It's
course.
just a question. I guess the question is, do you speak up because the principle is important, or do you shut up because you're selfish and you're taking care of yourself? Because there were plenty of times when I did both. I probably did more of the speaking up. There were times when a boss would come in and say, Dale, you don't want to go down this road. You
Yeah.
don't know what's down there. Just shut up, do
Right.
your job. But
Right.
was it you brought up the word soul? Is it
Right.
different for you as a priest than it is for middle level manager in some corporation? Do you see it as a different decision?
Yes, I do. I mean, I admire people with integrity in the corporate world, and I think, I mean, you yourself are evidence of someone who has happiness from having tried to pursue a path of integrity in life, and that gives you a kind of
Yeah.
peace and that goes for everybody in any situation. But in this, what's a little bit different in my case is, I mean, we are talking about an institution for which there is no alternative, right? I mean, the way to be in communion with Jesus Christ is the church that Jesus Christ founded, and the sacraments are the way that He gives us His grace. We don't know of any other way. It doesn't mean that He can't. He's God. He can give grace, and He does give grace as He chooses to do. But what we know is the sacraments of the church, and so that the church would be an institution that, with all its fault, I mean, every human institution is going to have problems, is going to have failures. I mean, I've failed as a priest many times, and needed to be remonstrated with and corrected, and tried to take lessons from the mistakes that I've made. There's always going to be mistakes, but the only way to deal with those mistakes is by open communication and straightforward speaking, even if someone is more powerful than you. I mean, as you know from the corporate world, I mean, that's, someone's got to be willing to take that chance that, like, I'm going to have a man-to-man conversation with you, even though you have power over me. And if we can't do that in the Catholic Church, then the souls are going to be lost. I mean, that's, and I don't think any of us want that.
If I could snap my fingers and go back to the point where Bishop Knestout didn't care about your blog,
Hmm.
and I told you that you could do everything on your blog except criticize the hierarchy of the church, would you go back to where you were?
Uh,
Could you go back to where you were?
right. Yeah. I mean, I guess what I would say, I would try not to write in anger at all. I mean, I certainly wrote in anger a few times, and and especially early on, I was extremely angry, and I could have waited a little longer in certain instances to publish what I published. That said, I mean, the fact of the matter is that even the things that I wrote where there were certain angry sentences, I mean, they were very carefully reasoned
Right.
arguments there. I mean, because that is the way I am. I mean, I don't pop off. That's not really the way I do things. And so if I get angry, it's because I've worked myself up in anger by laying out evidence that makes me angry, and the evidence is
Right.
real.
Right. Right.
So, I mean, I couldn't. I mean, if I went back, I'd wind up more or less where I am again. I think because I wouldn't be able to continue on ministering in the church without expressing myself, at least in some way, in a way that seems to me like an appropriate arena in which
Right.
to do it, so that I could keep believing in what I was doing, keep holding firm to the idea that the church is fundamentally an institution that has this holiness, this fundamental integrity that comes from God, that we can make mistakes and mess up, but we can't ruin because it's His, uh, and that He is the God of truth and justice, who's on the side of the one who suffers, and that's that. I mean, like the people in this, when it comes to the sex abuse problem in the Catholic Church, I mean, certainly there are some priests who have suffered maybe from being unfairly accused by people that were really out of their minds or even malicious. I mean, that's not like
Right.
that doesn't exist. But there are legions of people who have suffered wounds beyond what any of us who haven't been there really can even fully understand.
Who
To
keep it secret for decades
right, exactly,
because they can't process it enough to be able to come and tell somebody that
right,
they were abused. I mean,
exactly,
I think that's the thing that over the last few years with the Me Too movement and a whole bunch of other things, I wish that I could figure out how to create through education and strength and faith for people to say, you can't do that to me right after it happens.
right,
But
right,
unfortunately, we're not strong enough at this point. And some people deal with this constant memory for decades. And some of them will never be able to cleanse their soul because of the fact that they've never been asked to explain it to somebody who's going to show sympathy and regret and pain with them.
right,
I honor what you're doing. Okay, my
right,
whole life is built on trying to find the truth and try to weed through all of the non-truth and the legalese and all the other stuff that we've put on top of it. So I honor you for that.
thank you, Dave.
And I thank you for the time. And I don't know how this is going to end, but
Yeah,
I think you're in the hands of our Savior, and it's going to end well. I don't know what that looks like, but
yeah,
it's got to end well. If I believe as wholeheartedly as I think I do in our Savior, it's got to end better. It's got to
right.
end good for you.
Amen.
So
There you go. But thank you for saying that. It's really been good to be able to talk to you about this level of detail. It's helped me a lot, and I really
well, and
appreciate
if we
your
if we
interest.
get to the point where you go, boy, I wish I had said that, just let me
Yeah.
know, and we'll
Okay.
we'll put an addendum. We forgot this because there's a whole bunch of stuff out there.
All right.
So we'll just continue the conversation, and you be
Yeah.
well, and thank you for all
Yeah.
your time.
All
Bless
right.
you,
Thank
and
you. You too.
thank you for doing the good work of the Lord.
All
Appreciate
right.
it.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you ahead of time for all the work you're going to be doing to edit this thing, because that's going to be a
Uh,
lot of work.
we'll see. We'll see. Thank you much. I'll talk to
Right.
you later, my friend.
Sounds good, Dale.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Bye bye now.